This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Well, here we are. It's Monday again, the 22nd day of May. Thanks so much for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. Coming up today, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer joins me. $3 billion. The Pentagon is now claiming we've found $3 billion in aid to Ukraine. Found it. Meaning just laying around money that we can still send to Ukraine. Not making it up. We'll unpack that with Tony, as well as the Husks trip to Japan and the obscene, absurd things he's saying about our global standing, intelligence, China. Also, this weekend, kind of interesting, bittersweet, college graduation, or high school graduation, I should say. A lot of kids on to college. My oldest just graduated, and some thoughts and observations I had about kids graduating from high school. Also, John Fetterman is being lauded for his new style. We talked last week about the hoodie and the gym shorts. This is apparently now a real thing that they are going to try to suggest is the new way forward for not only John Fetterman, but maybe others should start entertaining it. And I have some thoughts about it. I'm kind of warming up to the idea, actually. Now, hang on. Hear me out. I'll get into it before too long. Sit tight. Also, I will just tell my friends in the Philadelphia area, if you don't know about this yet and you're around, this is a great Father's Day gift. Dr. Sebastian Gorka will be my special guest at the Cigar Republic in Conshohocken, June 20th. That is a Tuesday night in Conshohocken, just outside of Philadelphia. Complimentary cigars and hors d'oeuvres and a great seat because we're doing just an intimate little event. It's 100 people. That's all we're doing. But you'll get a complimentary pair of cigars and hors d'oeuvres as a cash bar. And you'll have FaceTime, Q&A time with Dr. Gorka, too. So I'm excited about this because it's the first one of its kind I've ever done. If you're interested and you're just hearing about this for the first time, we've just got a couple of tickets left. Again, it's a Tuesday night, June 20th. Go to 990theanswer.com. That's my Philadelphia radio station, 990theanswer.com. And right there at the top of the page, you'll see the link. Click on it and snap up your tickets. This would be a perfect gift for your dad and you, maybe. Or just come yourself or whatever. Love to see you there. Wanted to let you know about that. Also want to let you know about John Ruhlman, the guy that makes this show possible every week. usmedicalplan.com. Do you buy your own health insurance? Have you not checked out usmedicalplan.com yet? Have you not reached out to John Ruhlman yet? Oh my gosh. This is one of those things where when you're trying to make a budget every month and you're trying to figure out where do we cut costs, how do we save money, this is one of the easiest. Truly. If you buy your own insurance for your work, through work, for your employees, if you have a small business, if you pay for kids or, maybe a spouse that has special health needs, there are different plans out there. And I'm not talking about corner cutting plans. I'm talking about plans that are as good or better than yours. John Ruhlman has access to a network of over 80 different private insurers. So he knows exactly how to get you the best possible coverage and always reduce your rates. We're talking 30 to 60% rate reduction at least. I know people that have saved thousands a month for their family of 4 or their family of 3. Thousands. Now, if you haven't called them and given them just a couple of minutes of your time and you buy your own health insurance, seniors, if you're on a fixed income, you have to buy a supplemental. Please, I'm asking you just for your own common sense and your own budget, reach out. You can watch the video of John and I talking about insurance at chrisstigall.com if you want to get a better sense of what the guy's all about before calling him, but you will not regret the conversation. I'm certain of that. usmedicalplan.com or call 877-410-4321 and make sure you tell him Chris said hello. Old guy problem. Ready for this one? Old guy problem. I caught the raccoon stealing bird feed from my feeders in person this morning.
In person?
I'm getting dressed. You know what it is when you're trying to sneak out of the house and not in the, like you're doing something wrong way, but in the, again, we work in an ungodly hour way, Fast Eddie. You try not to wake up the whole house. You got kids sleeping, you got a wife sleeping, you're trying to be courteous, you're trying to get dressed and you're groping around for, toiletries and You're just desperate to try to put together some semblance of a human being at dark 30, the time of day we wake up, without waking up the whole house. You really, like, we reach burglar status by the time you put in a few years doing morning radio. You could burgle a home, I think, fairly effectively with the skills we've learned.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Just if you're looking for something to do in this down economy. So I'm sneaking around doing what I always do in the middle of the night, grabbing clothes and trying to put things, brush the teeth, and it's all dark, and the windows are open, and I hear clanking, clang, clang, clang outside. Now, we live in a very, very secluded area, so there's not a sound to be heard. So when I start hearing clanking outside, I know exactly what it is. It's a critter. I run and I grab. My wife keeps a flashlight stashed in the linen closet in case of emergency. So I run, I grab the flashlight out of the linen closet, and spotlight right on the bird feeder, and there he is. Sure enough, he scampers quickly, but for the first time I saw it with my own eyes. It is a remarkable feat. A raccoon scaling a string. I've got a string tied between two trees that are probably 12 feet apart, and a bird feeder that hangs easily 3 feet away from the tree, one side of the tree, one end of the 3 feet. So this raccoon has to scale the rope hanging from it, lift the top of the bird feeder off, which has a kind of a pinchable, retractable top so that it's not easily lifted. Like, it takes a little something. So the little bastard has to he hangs from the rope, pushes the top of the feeder up, and then reaches down into the feeder to help himself while hanging there. I've now witnessed it.
Dude, you could probably submit that video for cash.
I think so.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. I didn't know they could. I knew they were greedy. I knew they liked eating. I'd never seen one hanging, suspended, while using one arm to lift the feeder lid, reach down in, and eat while hanging. Now, that's commitment. I had to kind of hand it to the thing. So here's now my dilemma. Do I want to trap it? Do I want to buy a trap and try to trap it? And then if I do, what do I do when I catch it? Now, I know all you people that are saying the humane thing to do is to go out and drive it somewhere in the middle of nowhere and then release it. Although I've had less humane suggestions, I will give you that.
I think you could call animal control once you have it trapped, right? That'd be
not where I live. Animal control's like, deal with it yourself.
Okay. Ugh, man.
I live outside city limits, so I can't. Animal control won't come where I live. So I'm going to have to deal with it myself. I've had people actually offer to come over and trap it for me. No kidding.
Yeah.
Which I've thought about. But I feel like that's a challenge to my manhood. I don't want to call somebody else to come do something I feel like I should be able to do. But I don't really want a rabid raccoon trapped in a cage all to myself. You know what I mean? I feel like that's best left to pros.
Yeah, unless do you have like a really strong fishing rod you can kind of carry that cage once it's inside it?
I don't even mind carrying it. It's the releasing, because I've stared at these things. I actually went to the farm and whatever you call it store, and I looked at these things. They had them for sale, actually in bundles of 3, like a really big one, a medium-sized one, and then a small one. And then I stood there thinking, all right, how big a trap do you need? You don't want too big. You don't want too small. But the thing that I most worry about with the trapping, releasing. I don't quite understand how you let the thing out. And getting your hand down anywhere near that thing is what I want to avoid at all costs. Which is why this is where the less humane release has come in. I'll just tell you, I'll spare the audience. Some people have shared with me capturing the raccoon, and then there's a way to release it where you're not bothered by the raccoon. I'll just leave it to you that. So, but I don't know that I'll do that either. I've had some people say, just drive it out, drive it 3-4 miles away from your property so that it doesn't bother you anymore. Just release it out there somewhere else. I don't mind that. It's just the physical reaching down and letting the thing out they're not, some of them can be not so nice.
I got the perfect solution.
Yeah?
So you drive 3-4 miles out, you get out of the truck, open the truck bed, right? Make sure that the cage is up against the back.
Yeah.
Open the back truck window, go out with that fishing pole, pull the trap open, and let it run.
Or just leave the whole trap. That's not very humane, though. It'd die in the cage. So just buy a new trap. That's what my wife used to do. She refused to use a mousetrap twice. Just throw the whole thing. Just get rid of it. She won't. The idea of using a mousetrap a second time she couldn't deal with. Buy a new trap. I don't know. That seems wasteful. Buy a raccoon trap and then leave the raccoon in the trap and drop it up. Anyway. Well, it was quite a day yesterday. My oldest son, it's official now, a graduate of high school. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And, you get a little misty-eyed at times. Start to think. I tell you, Fast Eddie, I saw on your Instagram post just this weekend, little Eddie dancing around there in your house, and I thought to myself, my gosh, do I remember that? And for the first time in my life, I thought, now I remember what all the old guys used to say to me when my kid was little Eddie's age, and they'd say, oh boy, the time goes fast, and I'd go, I don't know what you mean, because every day feels like it's about a month and a half. And then here it is, he's walking across the stage and getting the diploma. It really is kind of amazing. I know I'm not telling anybody in this audience that has kids that are up and out and older than that anything new, but it's really remarkable. First of 3. And then it's always interesting to talk with people who have multiple kids, and this is like, so my son's girlfriend, who also graduated with him, she's the last of 4. And I will say what's interesting about, and we've gotten to know her parents pretty well, what's interesting about families who have multiple kids, I don't know if there's a lot of emotion about the first one, but all of them look as though they've just been rescued from Gilligan's Island after the 3rd or 4th one graduates. There's a lot. I noticed that while Christine and I felt a little misty, everyone we knew that had multiple kids who graduated, like their last one graduated yesterday, they seemed less misty, Fast Eddie. I don't know. Maybe you go through this 2 or 3 times and it hardens you a little bit.
All right, last one. Yeah, good.
There seemed to be a jubilance, a spring in the step of people whose 3rd or 4th kid graduated, their final one, than the first one. That's all I noted for sure. But anyway, that was fun yesterday. High school graduation season. That's always fun to watch these kids, and you never, they're all off to different experiences. I was just reading today, as a matter of fact, before we got the show started. Not that this is revolutionary or surprising, but I'm listening to where all these kids' plans are, although I am noticing that that's changing a lot, even from, when I graduated, and even in the last few years that I've attended ceremonies and I've heard where kids intend to go. I'm hearing a lot. 2 things that are sort of interesting. I don't know that they're commentary necessarily, although Kurt Schlichter has told us it's probably commentary. Fewer people enlisting. I'm hearing you couldn't fill a hand with the number of kids in my son's class who had declared that they were enlisting in the United States military, which maybe it wasn't always, it's always been like 1% of us that serve anyway, but it felt like an unusually, I think there were 3 kids in his graduating class, at least, that had publicly declared they were enlisting in the United States military, which I thought notably small to me. But that's anecdotal. Although we hear numbers are dramatically, dramatically down. Young people are not signing up, and quite frankly, veterans of the military are saying, no, thank you. Don't do it. I don't want my kid doing it. So there's that component. The other component is it seems as if more kids are entertaining 2-year community college options instead of going off to big, expensive 4-year universities. I'm starting to notice that. And again, maybe there's some confirmation bias because that's what my son's decided to do. He distinctly does not want to go off to a 4-year university. He just does not want to. And it's like, well, then I'd be a fool to force it, right? And then I read this morning, and I feel some sort of vindication about it. With the advent of AI, a lot of white-collar jobs, poof. and maybe forever, just going away forever, as companies are starting to evaluate what can AI do for this company that can help us eliminate some corporate jobs forever. It theorizes that maybe we're in an era where the white-collar job, many white-collar jobs, will just evaporate forever as AI can replace them. Data things, analytic things, numbers things, writings things, anything that involves, churning out data, writing, that sort of, and the author of the piece was basically saying, you have to start thinking about what is uniquely human about work out there. What is something uniquely human in terms of jobs and employment that AI cannot replicate? What are they? What is the answer to that, Fast Eddie? It's a very basic, simple answer.
I would say, blue-collar work.
Exactly right. That's where the money's going to be, man. I say that to my sons all the time. I'm like, look, I know that it is still not what you tell kids. I know we're still in this weird... 30 years ago, it was kind of almost sad or shocking. And I mean no disrespect to any of you who do blue-collar work, of course, because where I'm going with this is ultimately very laudatory. But you know this as well as I do. There was an era in this country, certainly during my parents' age, and 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever it was when I graduated, he's a trade. He's not going to go off to a university and get a degree and become a white-collar corner office guy. No, it turns out those are the ones that are being replaced. You know who's not being replaced, who will never be replaced? The guy that can fix your car or your air conditioner or your toilet or your electricity in your home. Those people, AI cannot replace them, ever. And guess what? Fewer and fewer and fewer people can do it. And guess what that means? Your rate goes up and up and up. When there's fewer of you doing it, more demand for it, and nobody else knows how, you're worth your weight in gold, my friend. So, I'm looking at my 18-year-old son, and while I've got some friends, no disrespect to them, that are sending their kids off to, Penn State or Alabama or whatever, I'm like, hey, good luck to you, and I hope they go make something great of themselves, but my son's not exactly that academically enthused, and I have to be honest with you, what a fool I'd be. What a fool I'd be to send him off to a 4-year institution to figure it out, and undoubtedly come out with some debt based on, the hundreds of thousands of dollars most big universities cost. I don't know how people justify it anymore, Fast Eddie. Really, I don't.
No, especially if it's like you said, I think something that developed a lot since I've been in college is these like senior vice president roles, right?
Yes.
Just like, senior vice president of this, senior vice president of that. And then all of a sudden, the last 10 years, all these senior vice presidents starts getting laid off. It's like that's what I feel like. I'm thinking of a job specifically, like content marketing, right?
Yep.
A company pays you, say a home builder pays you to write blogs and put them on different websites. So like, I can get your blog over here, Wall Street Journal opinion, all that stuff. Now all you do is type, it's like, I want to write a article about home building, and I wanted to appeal to the Tuscaloosa area of Alabama, and I wanted to appear here, and like, this is the framing, and then boom, you have an SEO friendly article already written. You
by
you
AI.
Yes.
Yeah, by AI. You don't need a person to do it anymore. Yeah.
Even though you learned all those things.
I don't know. I don't know if kids are being taught that or not. I really don't. I haven't asked my sons that. I guess I should, but. Anyway, I feel sort of blessed that we're at this point in history, that it's kind of happened now while they're young. It's clear there's an economic pivot happening in this country. That, and of course, inflation is just so outrageous. Heard another report this morning. People are paying more, in some cases, people are paying more for their car insurance than they are their car payments. Car insurance is through the roof like everything else. And why is that? Because there are fewer people that can pay for car repairs when they get in accidents. There are more accidents for some reason. We know that. People are driving more crazily. We know there's been more automobile deaths since COVID for, again, some reason we don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily been studied. But the point is, fewer people can fix cars. So the cost of people fixing your car, plus the cost of them because everything's inflation, it's huge. Insurance companies are losing money hand over fist insuring you and me driving on the open road. So people's car insurance rates are going through the roof because nobody's fixing cars. I don't know if you've taken your car in to be repaired lately, but gone are the days of, hey, we'll have it back to you on Wednesday if you drop it off on Monday. Those days are gone, Fast Eddie.
Well, that's the thing. I actually had to wait 2 weeks. I had to get something done to my truck. I had like 2 bearings.
Yeah.
And they said, when I called them, I said, okay, when's the next time you can get me in? 2 weeks from now. So literally 2 weeks after. So last week I had the work done. But yeah, it's insane.
I mean, sorry to sound like a 1%er here when I say this, but it's not mine. My dad bought a used boat a couple of years ago, right? And it needs some lower engine repair. This spring, he started calling around, and they're like, yeah, it'll be a couple of months. Oof. Like, so then you just look at people, and again, this is just an anecdote, not that I'm saying everybody has a boat, and boy, what a problem it is for Thurston, and I'll not be able to fix our boat. I don't mean it, very 1%er. But my point is, what if you went into boat repair? Like, you talk about the world of people that fix a car. Okay, how about the world of people that fix boats? Those guys are like stacked out months, and they charge a pretty penny too. So my point in saying all this is, as I listen to these kids go off to these 4-year institutions with no real idea of what they want to do, or maybe they'll change their major 3 times. In some ways, I feel, just a few years ago when I said, and I knew, it wasn't probably very likely that my oldest son really wanted to go off to a 4-year institution. And I had buddies that were like, oh, I don't know, dude. He really needs that degree. He really needs a 4-year. I mean, there's still that mentality. You really got to have that 4-year degree. I'm like, do you, though? Do you really? And I mean, as of today, where I sit today, I'm more convinced than ever before that's utter nonsense. I would so rather my son go into heating and air or car repair today and know that if I kicked off dead, he'd be able to take care of himself and have a skill than have some, I don't know, mid-level job in a cubicle that AI is going to replace in a month. Like, it's just not even close. My attitude in the last 30 years on this has changed so much. And I'm not, like, discouraging my kids. My middle son, he already sees the value in knocking out all the general education requirements in community college and then going off to a 4-year institution, but transferring in and just doing 2 instead of 4 just to save money. He's already looking at that for himself. I mean, he's doing it as a courtesy to his mother and me. We didn't ask him, but he's just doing the math. He's like, it doesn't make sense. I don't need to go off to a 4-year to get the general education requirements out of the way. And people say, oh, but what about the social? It's like, I don't know. Go out and meet friends later. Like, there's plenty of time to make friends. The math on it doesn't make any sense anymore, Fast Eddie, at all.
Well, it seems like unless you're going to be a doctor or a surgeon or a rocket scientist, like things that you actually need academic training in to understand and then implement in your own life, honestly, it seems like college at this point, a 4-year college, is more for the experience than it is actually gaining what you need for your job. And on top of all of that, if you've raised them in a fairly traditional home, you've raised them in the church, you've raised them with certain values, in many cases, I won't say all, but in most cases, you're sending them off to a 4-year indoctrination camp where they're going to have everything that you ever taught them or that you believe in or shares a value in your family completely eroded and mocked and derided and attacked. And you get to go, in many cases, into debt for it. I don't know. I feel blessed in some ways that we're at this time in history where we can all kind of look at this with a little wider eyes than maybe even 10 years ago when you were still just, okay, happy graduation, off to the 4-year institution. Happy graduation, off to the 4-year institution. Anyway, that's my weekend. Graduation and raccoons, folks. It's been my pleasure and honor to talk about Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, just off the Blue Route, as my dentist and friend of over 12 years now. But now he has 2 brand new associates, his daughter Alexa and Dr. Geddes. Tell him about him, Bob.
Yeah, it's really a thrill for me to have both the dentists, my daughter and Dr. Jared Dennis. One of the things that I love about them both is when they don't have a patient in their chair, they're in my room watching what I do and trying to learn from me. And we hear enough about the new generation and they think they know everything and they don't want to work. And I've got two dentists who are really, really want to learn and really, really willing to work hard. And I enjoy learning from them. They brought some new skills and some new technologies to our office that will be great benefits to our patients. And so, if anything, I think that having them both there is going to expand and lengthen my career as opposed to shorten my career.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. The NAACP is attacking Ron DeSantis in Florida as being hostile to black Americans, and black Americans ought not go there. The latest political stunt against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis may well have failed in its infancy. Let me, hang on here. I have the original story here. I was going to read the punchline first, but like any good joke teller, let me give you the setup first. The NAACP has issued a formal travel advisory over the weekend for the state of Florida, saying that it has become hostile, the state has, to black Americans. On a seeming quest to silence African American votes, the governor and the state of Florida have shown that African Americans are not welcome in the state of Florida. Due to this sustained, blatant, relentless, and systemic attack on democracy and civil rights, the NAACP hereby issues a travel advisory to African Americans and other people of color regarding the hostility toward African Americans in Florida. The advisory points to several of DeSantis' controversial policies, including legislation he signed on Monday to prohibit colleges from spending funds on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was the Stop Woke Act, which he also signed, restricting how workplaces and schools can discuss race during required training or instruction. Also blocked an advanced placement African American studies course in the state's public schools, claiming it lacked educational value. The NAACP president, Derek Johnson, said, "Let me be clear. Failing to teach an accurate representation of the horrors and inequalities that black Americans have faced and continue to face, is a disservice to students and a dereliction of duty to all." All right, ready for the punchline. Had to give you the setup. Probably the best communications team in the business is the rapid response team of Ron DeSantis. You can just see this coming from downtown, can't you? Now, what's your immediate reaction if you are the Ron DeSantis communications team? So you get this that comes across your desk. The NAACP has declared you, your office, and all of Florida hostile to black Americans. If you're a communicator and you're in the business of responding on behalf of the governor, what's the first thing you do? I'm not sure my mind would have gone here. Do you know this answer, Fast Eddie?
I don't, man. His team is too good.
They're so good.
They really are.
No, yeah. Just take a guess. What would be, so
Okay.
You've got to issue a response. You got to answer this. Your boss and the state are now called hostile to blacks. So you got to respond to this nationally, publicly. What might you do to counter that?
I guess first I'd get someone in my administration who is a person of color.
Good guess.
So I would say, okay, who in our administration is black, and from there I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I again, this is what makes them so good at what they do. So, reacting to this, the governor's press secretary, Jeremy Redfern, immediately started digging around on Twitter. What do you suppose he started digging up and researching?
Maybe the person who issued the statements past social media?
Well, yeah, good. You're close. You're getting closer. He said, hey, that's really interesting. Here's your vice chair of the NAACP chilling in Clearwater, Florida. and he posted her old tweet, a photo, a selfie of the vice chair of the NAACP and her husband hanging out in Clearwater Beach, Florida last year. No, I'm sorry. Not last year. This year. May 20th.
Oh, man.
No, sorry. Not last year. Like this month.
Like 2 days ago.
That's right. Is that not wonderful? Here's your vice chair chilling in Clearwater, Florida. Karen Boynton Towns is her name. There she is sitting on the beach. She and her husband. Clearwater, a beautiful part of the state, by the way. I highly recommend it. She's got good taste. This is so good. 37.9 million visitors, a record. Florida's tourism industry is thriving with a single quarter record of 37.9 million visitors to the Sunshine State. That was the second response from the press secretary for DeSantis. Cope, 3.79 million visitors, a record. Along with the refutations against claims about Florida's education system not teaching accurate history, others pointed out the potential harm the NAACP was doing to the community they purportedly serve. As the Miami event Urban Beach Week was brought up. Something called Urban Beach Week. No kidding. One user suggested they may not be in touch with any real people. Then a screen capture of the event scheduled for Memorial Day weekend, this coming weekend, that touts being, quote, the largest urban festival in the world that caters toward the professional hip-hop generation 21 and over. That's this coming weekend in Miami. Something called the Urban Festival.
So, probably the biggest party.
Oh.
Oh, man.
Aren't they good? They are so fantastic. Then this one over the weekend. I told you last week that I couldn't really put a finger on it, and I didn't want to sound like some old guy because Fetterman showed up in a hoodie at official Senate business and an official Senate press conference. I said, this is just one more assault, and it may not seem like that big a deal, but it's another assault on tradition, value, norms, things that we all agree. You know, the Congress is a place that we should all respect, and as such, you should dress accordingly. And Fetterman showing up and wearing a hoodie and gym shorts and sneakers, I said, this is just one more attack on it, believe it or not. And, we talked about this. That, there's going to be a certain class of people out there that think this is just really great. The same people that take their shoes off when flying. These people. They're barely dressed when they get on an airplane. It's more degradation of our institutions, our norms. And sure enough, media all weekend long wrote about what a great thing it is. In fact, this shows that the poor fella, he's been depressed. He's been very depressed. Poor guy. He went to Walter Reed and he's been depressed, and everybody's so worried about how depressed he is. So the Associated Press and then other media outlets pick up on it, say that it's good to see him running around the Senate doing official business in a hoodie and gym shorts because that shows that he's really starting to pick up. He's starting to feel a lot better now. The suit that he was wearing apparently gave him the blues. But now that he's back in his hoodie, he looks his old self again, Fast Eddie. And they're all celebrating the fact that he looks his old self doing official business in the hoodie and gym shorts. Isn't that a happy day?
That's right. I cannot tell you how depressed I get when wearing an actual suit to go to work or do business or meet, people or decide important things,
I've never met any. Now, look, there are a lot of people that are not comfortable in suits. I understand that. Sure. I've never met anybody that doesn't understand that when you put on a suit, when you put on a jacket and tie, and you walk into a room, everybody understands that with that carries self-respect. There's certain dignity to that. You carry yourself a little differently. Everybody understands that. Your dress, in fact, I had a story 2 weeks ago, last week. It was all about that. Your dress is a reflection of yourself. However you're feeling about yourself is typically the way you will dress on any given day. So, if that's the case, this would not suggest to me that John Fetterman is feeling better. It looks to me like he's a stoner who wants to play Xbox and eat Pringles. That's what it looks like to me. But here it is. This same story ran all weekend long. Back in hoodies and gym shorts. Fetterman tackles Senate life after depression treatment. How many stories like this are we going to... It's been a month now, hasn't it? Why do they keep writing this like he's just... Before Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman checked himself into the hospital, he walked the halls of the Senate stone-faced and dressed in a suit. These days, he's back to wearing hoodies and gym shorts. Male senators are expected to wear a jacket and tie on the Senate floor, but Fetterman has a workaround. He votes from the doorway of the Democratic cloakroom or the side entrance, making sure his yay or nay is recorded before ducking back out. In between votes this past week, Fetterman's hoodie stayed on for a news conference with 4 Democrat colleagues in suits. People close to Fetterman say his relaxed, comfortable style is a sign that the senator is making a robust recovery after 6 weeks of inpatient treatment at Walter Reed for clinical depression. Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, quote, he's setting a new dress code. What did I tell you? I said this last week. They're going to try to get the Senate, they're going to try to get members of Congress to start dressing down to Fetterman. And people are going to say, well, he's just like me. He dresses like me. He looks like me. He's setting a new dress code, said Peter Welch, Senator of Vermont, the only other first-term Democrat in the Senate, and spent a lot of time with Fetterman during the orientation. He was struggling, and now he's a joyful person to be around. Isn't that nice? How do you feel about Fetterman finding a workaround to vote? He votes from the doorway of the cloakroom or side entrance. So he basically, from outside the Senate chamber, shouts, ah, or whatever, you know. It's like, Peter, what's his name, in Young Frankenstein. Pull on her! So that's what he does. From outside the Senate chambers, ah! I don't even know if they know whether he's saying yay or nay, but that's his workaround, Fast Eddie. He doesn't have to wear a suit as long as he's out on the floor. So he stands in the door and barks his vote. And they think this is very cool because he's found his joy now, you see.
I think that shows how lazy he truly is.
Exactly.
The kind of person, the kind of character that now occupies a very important office.
John Fetterman is a lazy, selfish, worthless piece of excrement is what he is. And I'm tired of enabling this. I'm tired of pitying it. I'm tired of talking about him like he's some sort of, work-a-day, average Joe. He's a lazy piece of excrement who is always sponged off the taxpayers and his parents. He's never worked an honest day in his life. He doesn't have the common decency to be honest about his own health to his voters, to his family, to those closest to him, to his donors. I don't find anything admirable about this guy. I think he is a first-class piece of excrement. MyPillow 2.0. I don't know if you are familiar with the product yet. I don't know if you've seen Mike Lindell talking about MyPillow 2.0, but I'm sleeping on it right now, and I can tell you this is amazing. He's developed a pillow that actually keeps you cool at night. Sincerely. I didn't even know that was possible. If you're somebody that runs a little warm at night, Mike has actually created a MyPillow 2.0, which is that adjustable fill that he's talked about for the last 20 years, but now a new fabric that helps regulate your body temperature through the night, which creates a lower surface temperature, and that gets you a better restful night's sleep. Now, here's the thing. If you go to MyPillow.com and you order the new MyPillow 2.0 today, you'll get another one for free just by using my name, Chris. So go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listeners square,
and enter my name, Chris, and you will get a second MyPillow 2.0 for free. My name also gets you up to 66% on everything on that website, 66% off. Robes, slippers, sheets, dog beds, my coffee. Mike has an unbelievable spate of merchandise at MyPillow.com, more than I had any idea. So if you haven't shopped MyPillow yet, I hope you'll go. I hope you'll use my name, Chris, and save big-time money on great products, which are all American made. They are warranted for 10 years. There's a 60-day money-back guarantee. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call 800-932-5056, 800-932-5056, or mypillow.com.
Chuck Todd is lamenting the Durham report. I thought this was a nothing burger. All his colleagues over on MSNBC said this was a big bunch of nothing, didn't they? Now, Chuck Todd didn't seem to... Now, I wonder if he'd feel this way if Republicans ran the Senate. What you're about to hear him say. Incidentally, I had one more thought. This is sort of a contrarian thought. Sorry, I don't mean to jump all over the place, but I was just thinking about something. Maybe everyone in Congress should dress exactly like Fetterman. Because given their performance and given the way they're behaving, maybe until we get a balanced budget, all of them should be forced to dress like Fetterman. Trash people should wear trash clothes. Dressing them up is actually very misleading now that I think about it. They aren't smart. They're not responsible. In fact, I would submit to you, actually, most members of Congress are exactly like Fetterman. So I think I've changed my point of view. Maybe he's dressed appropriately. The rest of them are inappropriately dressed. Maybe we should have them all dressed like Fetterman until they can act like responsible, respectable adults. Just crossed my mind. Anyway, back to where I didn't lose my point. Chuck Todd is on Meet the Press over the weekend lamenting the Durham report, of all things, and suggesting, gosh, maybe we need a church-style committee. And we're going to refresh your memory as to what that is coming up. But maybe we need a church-style committee. Again, keeping in mind that Democrats run the Senate, I don't know that Chuck Todd would speak this enthusiastically about a look under the hood of the FBI if Republicans ran it. But anyway, he said this. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Take a listen.
Welcome back. If you only consume media on the right, you might be excused for thinking this week's 306-page Durham report on the Russian inquiry was a bombshell and damning, and that the investigation was an abomination and a soft coup. But Special Counsel John Durham's actual sharpest conclusions after a 4-year investigation were that the FBI suffered from confirmation bias and, quote, discounted or willfully ignored material information.
What do you call that,
countered the narrative of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. The report recommended no wholesale changes to FBI rules for regulations or wiretaps, and Durham did not send a single person to jail, even though former President Trump once predicted that Durham would uncover the crime of the century. That said, Dan Balls, this is not an FBI that should feel good about what Durham discovered, because at a minimum, this issue of confirmation bias, it goes to the heart of how James Comey seemed to worry so much about what the perception of the FBI was, that he, whether it was overdid or underdid Hillary stuff, and then overdid or underdid Trump stuff.
Well, since Comey, the FBI has been under attack. And
under attack?
The Durham report in many ways confirms what the
they've been attacking us.
It's almost identical.
Almost identical.
Yeah.
And in some ways backed off some of the rhetoric that they had going into it. Mm-hmm. But the FBI's been in a compromised position, and part of that has to do with the nature of our politics today. The FBI has become a politicized institution and a political target, and this is going to make it much more difficult for Merrick Garland as he goes forward with these investigations.
Poor thing.
And I don't see any way out of that anywhere in the near future.
No, and let me throw in this headline from your newspaper, Dan. FBI misused surveillance tool on January 6 suspects, BLM, Black Lives Matter arrestees, and others. Simone, look, trust in the FBI is eroding left and right. Feels like we're in the moment that we need a real church committee, that this is a moment like when the J. Edgar Hoover FBI clearly was no longer helping the American people. There was a moment. This feels like we might be in one of those moments.
Okay, I don't need to hear from her, but how about that? Feels like we may be in one of those moments like J. Edgar Hoover days when the American people didn't feel like the FBI was in the business of helping the American people anymore. You think? Balls. Dan Balls. Oh, they're political targets. You just said they're acting politically. See, explain this to you, Mr. Balls. When an institution that shouldn't be political acts politically, you can't then get upset that people target them as political actors in political messaging. Follow? When you... It's so stupid. He said they're acting politically. The FBI is acting politically. That's where you stop. You don't then get to turn around and go, and then these people are attacking them in the most vicious ways politically. You just told us why that's happening. They've created this. They've made themselves overtly political. Anyway, the point is, Chuck Todd says, feels like we're in the middle of a real need for a church committee. One of those moments. J. Edgar Hoover clearly no longer helping the American people. There was a moment. Might be one of those moments. Let's go back and remember who Church was. On this very show, Meet the Press, 1973. Frank Church is a senator from Idaho, a Democrat. And he had this to say about the intelligence community and a warning. Listen.
Senator, let me follow up by asking, do you think that the CIA and military intelligence agencies and the FBI have used the emergency provisions, both in law and by emergency agency, the Federal Preparedness Agency it's called now, to have contingency plans which threaten the liberty of American citizens?
Mr. Rowan, in due course, the committee will pass judgment on those questions. I'm not going to pre-guess the committee or prematurely attempt to pass judgment on this program. But let me tell you this. In the need to develop a capacity to know what potential enemies are doing, the United States government has perfected a technological capability that enables us to monitor the messages that go through the air. These messages are between ships at sea. They could be between units, military units in the field. We have a very extensive capability of intercepting messages wherever they may be in the airwaves. Now, that is necessary and important to the United States as we look abroad at enemies or potential enemies. We must know. At the same time, that capability at any time could be turned around on the American people. And no American would have any privacy left. Such is the capability to monitor everything. Telephone conversations, telegrams, it doesn't matter. There would be no place to hide. If this government ever became a tyranny, if a dictator ever took charge in this country, the technological capacity that the intelligence community has given the government could enable it to impose total tyranny. And there would be no way to fight back, because the most careful effort to combine together in resistance to the government, no matter how privately it was done, is within the reach of the government to know. Such is the capability of this technology. Now, why is this investigation important? I'll tell you why. Because I don't want to see this country ever go across the bridge. I know the capacity that is there to make tyranny total in America. And we must see to it that this agency and all agencies that possess this technology operate within the law and under proper supervision so that we never cross over that abyss. That's the abyss from which there is no return.
Right. Frank Church, Democrat. That was a Democrat from 1973 called Frank Church. Now, he's talking about technological capabilities and his worry about the technology a tyrant, a dictator would have at his disposal should we ever become a dictatorship or a tyranny. Well, I'd argue that's very much here in many ways, and we don't really even focus much on the technological capabilities. We have things like the FISA court. We're still in many ways it's kind of old school power grabbing. Here's a headline from Fox News just over the weekend. The FBI improperly used warrantless search powers against U.S. citizens more than 278,000 times by the end of 2021. Let me read that one more time just so that can set in. The FBI improperly used warrantless search powers against citizens more than 278,000 times as of the end of 2021. U.S. citizens covered in that improper effort included people involved in the Capitol events of January 6th, George Floyd protests in the summer of 2020, and donors to a failed congressional candidate, the filing said. Section 702 of the FISA Act, that's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, allows the government to conduct targeted surveillance of non-U.S. persons located abroad to acquire foreign intelligence information. When U.S. citizens are flagged as part of these investigations, the FBI takes over the process of querying them for possible security reasons. As Director Wray has made clear, the errors described in the FISA court's opinions are completely unacceptable, said a senior FBI official today. Right. As a result of the audits that revealed these instances of noncompliance, the FBI changed its querying procedures to make sure these errors do not happen again. Right. We are committed to continuing the work and providing greater transparency in the process to earn the trust of the American people. Right. Fox News first reported last month the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said there was a, quote, significant decline in the number of queries the FBI made into U.S. citizens between 2021 and 2022. Oh, well, we should all feel so much better. For the year ending 2022, the FBI conducted a total 204,000 queries, a 94% drop from the previous year. The filing released Friday detailed a number of improper queries, including a batch query for over 19,000 donors to a congressional campaign. You know, I'm probably going to get the audio from Friday. I was filling in for my friend Vince Colonnese in Washington, D.C., and I got the chance to interview one of the whistleblowers during this House hearing on the weaponization of government. And I asked him about FBI agents, or what they called UCs, undercover personnel from the FBI, embedding themselves in things like January 6th and the Gretchen Whitmer case. And he had some very, very interesting things to say about it, but made it very, very clear. I'm not going to try to recount it all here because I can't shorthand some really interesting analysis he offered. But long story short, he confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the FBI has grown well beyond its scope and function. And it is correct. Harriet Hageman said it last week. This is the woman that took over for Liz Cheney. She said it last week in the hearings. She said the FBI has now turned into an intelligence. They're not a law enforcement. You understand the difference between this? They're not a law enforcement agency anymore. They're an intelligence gathering institution now. There's a difference there. Big difference there. They're constantly spying on, gathering, collecting, watching. They're a deep state surveillance organization. They're not enforcing laws. They're not catching lawbreakers. They're actively surveilling people. And in many cases, trying to set people up. Basically encouraging people to do the wrong thing so they can go, aha, gotcha. Baiting people into breaking law. Setting people up to breaking law, embedding themselves in situations where they think someone might be inclined to break the law, and then giving them the tools or the ideas or the resources to push them into that next step so they can go, gotcha! Entrapment. And then, of course, as we know, ripping people out of their homes in the early morning hours like Mark Houck. So Frank Church from 1973, it's not about technology. This is tyranny. They're just using old school power to do it. It's really, I mean, I'm sure there's some technological components to it, but it's not the technology we have to fear. FISA is what we have to fear. We've created this thing called a FISA court. They just go before it and go, hey, we have reason to believe this guy might be a domestic terrorist. I mean, and we know who they deem domestic terrorists now, parents that speak up at school board meetings. Do we need so Chuck Todd says we need a church-style committee. I don't know if he'd feel that way if Republicans ran the Senate. That's all I'm saying. I don't know that I trust it coming from Chuck Todd.
Very bizarre admission from the Pentagon this week of an accounting error that suggested that the U.S. has at least $3 billion that it didn't know it had that it can use for Ukraine aid. That's a hell of an accounting error, and it provides a lot of fodder to critics of U.S. aid to Ukraine and critics who say there's not enough oversight going on. Are you concerned about this accounting error?
Well, one thing I just want to make clear, that is not money that went out the door and disappeared. That is not a waste of that $3 billion. It is simply a tally of how much military equipment we have given them. And the way that the Pentagon was counting it was, what's the replacement cost for the equipment we provide, rather than just the actual cost of that equipment. Once you make that adjustment, it turns out we have an additional $3 billion that we can spend to provide even more weapons to Ukraine. And at the end of the day, not one penny of U.S. dollars will have gone missing or have been misallocated. It will all be provided in the form of equipment to Ukraine on the battlefield.
Nope. That is so absolutely absurd. I've never heard of anything so absurd in my life. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer, I don't know anything. By the way, he's the president of the Herb London Center for Policy Research, author of Operation Dark Heart. Colonel, I don't know the first thing about military spending, what equipment costs. I don't know any of it. All I know is when the Pentagon says, you know, we started looking over our books, and as it turns out, the money we spent on Ukraine, we overshot it by $3 billion. We misrepresented the numbers. It turns out why we've got $3 billion to play with. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that, Tony. Good morning.
Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Good morning. Yeah. So look, let's break this into three parts to make sure we understand what's going on. So first off, we've been depleting our stocks of war supplies to provide the Ukrainians. Last time I checked, if you go to the car dealership and you buy, you basically sell a car that was made in 1980 and you buy one made in 2010, the 2010 one's going to be a lot more expensive. So basically all these wartime stocks that we're depleting that we're having to give, and we're going to, by the way, have to replenish them. It's not like we can't live without those things because we're going to have those available in case we have to do something. They're going to be 2 to 3 times more in cost. So on the face of what he's saying, it's absolutely incorrect by the fact we know that these higher expenses are coming. Secondly, the Pentagon has never once passed an audit, not once ever. So you're telling me now that an organization that cannot pass a normal audit just found $3 billion? I mean, this is beyond insane. And the last thing, this is a lot of money, $3 billion. Chris, if you were told to go out tomorrow and spend $3 billion, you would literally spend the rest of your life spending $10 million a day trying to get rid of that money. That's how much money we're talking here.
Stunning.
So it's literally that insane for them to say what they're saying.
A way to think of I'll go with that analogy again. You're saying, I think I get this. They're basically looking at old equipment that they're giving away, and they're valuing it at old, like past. So how do you say this? Like if my house burned to the ground today, God forbid, it's going to cost in this economy far more to rebuild than what I bought it for originally. Is that another way to think about it?
Correct. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but they're trying to play the old Potomac two-step here, saying, we've been rating all of these things that we're giving them as too expensive. We're going to give them the 1980s price, not the 2010 price. Yes, exactly.
It's just obscene.
And so, geez, we found all this value we had lost, $3 billion.
And now we can spend it, by the way. That's the edit. Now we can spend $3 billion is their attitude. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, it's sick.
So they think we're stupid.
Yeah,
they think we're stupid. And clearly, they're counting on it.
I guess
like,
so.
No, this is as bad as it looks.
Oh, meanwhile, Biden announces new $375 million. we seem to throw out this number 300 somehow. It's usually always around 300 million. I feel like we've done this several dozen times now. It feels like, maybe not that many, but 375 million military aid for Ukraine during the most recent Zelensky meeting. This is tough. I met with a couple of people just a couple of weeks ago from Ukraine who were very, very emotional and talking about the human suffering. They come from Ukraine. They were here visiting. And they told some very heart-wrenching stories about some things their loved ones and families were going through. And just to get out of Ukraine to get here, it was gut-wrenching. So it isn't that the Ukrainian people aren't suffering, and it isn't that we're cold and callous to that. But at the same time, when Biden just keeps popping up and announcing, here's another 300 million, like shoveling it into the furnace, I don't feel like we understand what we're doing with it.
We don't, and that's the issue. If we're trying to win, what he's doing is not going to accomplish that. This is simply extending the suffering of the Ukrainian people. And I agree with President Trump on this. He said it very clearly. We need to stop the suffering. And the way to do that is to actually start addressing the root issues. There's a coin of phrase for you of how we got to where we're at right now. Remember, one of the things that was very recognizable is the initial invasion of Ukraine. It was very sloppy, very poorly planned. One of the reasons they did it is because they saw Biden weakness. So they said, here's our opportunity. So they decided to jump on it. Biden chose to show weakness. If they take a little bit, no big deal. He opened the door for that. So, and that now it's kind of this, let's send them Abrams. Let's try this. There's no clear or concise thinking that is going to establish a strategy to essentially kind of fix those things that were made in the way of mistakes by Biden and miscalculation. So until you do that, send them F-16s. It won't matter. It's just going to be another wasted weapon system where they create this anticipated, this is going to be the game changer, and it's not. This simply raises the expectations of the Ukrainian people and yet will result in no positive gain for the Ukrainians and continue their suffering. It's just the way it is.
Tony, I don't know that we've talked since China helped broker a deal with Saudi Arabia. China seems to be increasingly, and Russia for that matter, they're global players. They seem to be the power brokers with a lot of African and Middle Eastern nations. And my friend John Hayward at Breitbart actually offered up something that I hadn't considered before, that China and Russia are able to go to a lot of these, if you want, more socially conservative countries and say, hey, see what they're doing? See the way the United States is carrying on with the transgender stuff and all of that. That this is sort of a way that the progressives are subversively eroding our standing in the world, eroding our military, giving China and Russia a talking point to some of these traditionalist countries to say, you can't trust them. They're going to bring that kind of stuff here, deal with us, and that's appealing. Do you think there's any merit to that?
Absolutely. Look, the Russians recognize vulnerability. They've always been able to be very effective in messaging against our vulnerabilities. This goes back to the Cold War. The Chinese have become masters of using soft power. And one of the key components of soft power is information operations and messaging. So, Putin, when he talks about the war, he's talking to that larger audience. That's why he's been so restrained. And I know people are going to roll their eyes when I say that, but he has. He has not taken tanks and rolled them across the steppe to go, destroy whole cities. He's trying to basically convince the world of the righteousness of what he's doing. China, the same thing. The Chinese are trying to say, hey, we're the adults in the room now. We're going to be able to offer and broker agreements which stand the test of time. Joe Biden cannot be trusted. And come on, Chris. I mean, did you not see him, Biden, meandering around Hiroshima, looking like he lost his dog,
yes,
falling down stairs and stuff? That opens the door for the messaging we're talking about. Nobody trusts Joe Biden. And that's simply the current fact of the way things are.
And when he says things like this about the Chinese, again, the dismissiveness of the Chinese spy balloon, number 68 here.
Yeah.
Listen to this from over the weekend while he's in Japan.
Well, number one, you're right. We should have an open hotline. at the Bali conference, that's what the President Xi and I agreed we were going to do and meet on. And then this silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spine equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down, and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that begin to thaw very shortly. But in the meantime, what's happened is, I think it's fair to say, for those of you who have dealt with the Japanese government and reported from here for a long time, the situation in terms of our relations with Japan have never, ever, ever in American history been stronger.
China. I mean, I have to imagine when they hear him say, and by the way, it would be edifying to go back and hear his original reaction, that first foreign interview. Remember the interview he gave with the foreign national asking about the Chinese spy balloon, and he laughed. The idea that they would blah, blah, blah. Interesting that he says it's a silly balloon that had 2 freight cars worth of spying equipment on it. I mean, so at least he acknowledges now what it was. He didn't used to even acknowledge it because it's silly.
Right. So, last time I checked, 2 freight cars of spy stuff is not silly. It's serious. And one of the things we've talked about on your show, and I've said this in media, that capability is something the Chinese are using for purposes of developing targeting packages for nuclear weapons. I mean, it's kind of like, you want to give them that persistent surveillance access so they can loiter over our secret sites to get a really good, precise radar picture of what's going on. That's silly. But this, again, is this dismissive attitude that things which we know are important are just, no big deal. And, by the way, this is not going to, him making this comment about silly balloons is not going to thaw any relationship with China.
No.
He's deluded. He's completely deluded or worse.
And it's got to, people like, here's what he originally said, by the way, his first interview after that balloon, 7 days over the continent, and then they shoot it down over the coast of off the coast of South Carolina. Here was the first thing he said about that back then.
Wasn't it a major security breach for the United States, just the fact that the balloon came into the airspace and flew over the country for so many days?
No, look, the total amount of intelligence gathering that's going on by every country around the world is overwhelming. And the idea that a balloon could traverse, break American airspace is, anyway, it's not a major breach. I mean, look, it's a violation of international law. It's our airspace. And once it comes in our airspace, we can do what we want with it.
7 days, not a big deal. Again, this weekend he says it had 2 freight cars full of spy equipment on it. That's quite a movement since that initial answer.
Well, he has a lot of movements apparently, but prune juice are required for those. But I detract from our focus here. But yes, those. So no, I mean, come on. Look, I know we're making fun of this a bit, but look, he has completely lost all ability to judge. I think he's told certain things, and he kind of parrots them. And like the latest thing he was told to parrot is, it's just no big deal. 2 boxcars of spy stuff, no big deal. And I think this is what even makes it more dangerous, because not only is he seen as feeble, he's seen as not in control. So this is why we have things like the Russian invasion, because I do think Putin at the last minute said, hey, we can get away with this. Let's go do it. And that's why it was so badly organized in the beginning. It's taken the Russians a good year to kind of get organized. So,
Tony, the Chinese, the last thing the Chinese want is a change in regime. I mean, they're perfectly content to see Biden in another term, are they not? Right. And God forbid, God help us, another 5 years of this?
So this is something that's very clear that our adversaries want Biden there. Now, one can argue maybe he's compromised. I mean, look, the whole investigation of Hunter Biden, a lot of roads lead back to China. I think he did take money. I'm just saying, I've said this. I'm not saying anything I haven't said already. I think Joe Biden's compromised. I think his entire administration's compromised. Tony Blinken was the guy who actually received like a $20 million donation to the Penn Biden Center via the University of Pennsylvania. So I think everybody at the senior level of his administration are corrupt. And I think this is why they're so willing to allow for the diminution of our prestige and military capacity for purposes of allowing people, countries like China to kind of move forward. And this is very dangerous. And again, I don't know how we're supposed to just sit back and accept this, because this is not in our interest to allow the Chinese to go about. Oh, by the way, I was on Australian Channel 9 TV. The Australians are worried about this. They have me on to talk about this on a very regular basis now, Chris. And I'm telling you, our allies are not digging this passive attitude the Biden administration is putting forward.
Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer, it's so infuriating. By the way, Hunter Biden, one more story in front of me from him today. $55K. Hunter Biden spends $55K on a private jet to attend a hearing to claim he's too poor to pay child support. The money, 9 different Bidens, they now believe, have been on the take. 9 of them. Yeah. They're a crime family now, organized money laundering crime family.
$55,000. You know how much money that is to normal people?
Yeah,
$55,000.
That's more than a salary for some. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sick.
Unbelievable.
Tony Schaffer, he's president of the Herb London Center for Policy Research, author of Operation Dark Heart. Thanks for kicking off the week with us, Tony.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.